Duke, what we have is a packet here with these items in there, and our evaluation sheets are in there, and you'll be able to see that they're not previously marked or anything. And starting with myself, I'll be sitting down there, and then we have, have you met all these folks?
Just a minute. Some of them already knew, some as I walked in the door.
Okay, so we're glad to have you here today. If you'll open this up and take a look at it.
You need a knife for that one,
No, you didn't.
Huh?
I had to reopen that one to put his name.
Oh, okay.
Whose knife was this? Thank you.
I've got another one, I'll get that one back.
You got figures.
It's just basically going over the rules that we've established in fairness to all the candidates. And once you've observed this paperwork, then you can endorse it here and I'll endorse it there. And there's our sheets of how we'll evaluate the questions. If you'll let me have those, I'll pass those out. You can be signing. Okay.
No notes.
That's the summary again.
Of course, I need another one.
Not even to jot down for an old
He
fella
will,
to
he will
remember
for you
stuff.
too.
That's the game we play.
Okay.
We'll repeat the question if you need.
Can't give any answers, but we can repeat the question.
Once you're done there, Bill's gonna read the rules to you.
Did we have a name tag up here?
It's in that packet.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Good thing you reopened it and didn't forget it.
There you go.
And if you listen in like 9 seconds, you're gonna hear something that is just the test. Our timer will be,
Can't miss that.
yeah, that will be, you're done. Okay, I'm gonna read these rules for the camera and for the candidate. The Ellis County Tea Party rules for the vetting procedure. No one is allowed to be in the room except for the vetting panel and the candidate. All electronics shall be turned off except for laptops and video recorders used by the vetting panel. That means cell phones and voice recorders shall be turned off in the room. No written materials or notes will be taken by the candidate. Ellis County Tea Party vetting panel and candidate agree that all questions and responses at this vetting session are to remain confidential until videos are uploaded and considered public information on the ETCP website, and it's given there. Verbal questions will be asked, and verbal responses to those questions will be given. Answers will be limited to 2 minutes per question, and that's what the timer will be at the end. I've got a 30-second timer and a red timer, but that buzzer works better than the red timer. During the video session, no follow-up questions will be asked, nor will candidate be given any explanation of the questions. Candidate may request a repeat of the question at the time the question is first asked. The candidate may request a copy of the vetting interview recording for a fee of $5. Recording will not be released until the video is posted on the ECTP website and the fee has been received. And that's what you signed, and that's our rules for the candidate. Our rules also now give you a 2-minute opening statement, if you so want it.
I probably won't take a full 2 minutes.
Okay.
One of the things that you should know about me, and hopefully you'll figure out, is that you're not going to get to hear from any of my handlers, you're not going to get to hear from any consultants, you're not going to get to hear from any polls that we've placed. I'm just going to answer the questions. You're going to hear me. And there's gonna be some things that we may not agree on, but that's what I love about this country. There's gonna be a whole lot more things that we do agree on than what we don't agree on. I won't lie to you, and that's been a policy of mine for a long time. I won't lie to you. If, however, I find out that something I said was not truthful at a later date, I will come back and tell you, hey, I made a mistake. Own your mistakes, own everything you say, lie to no one. Just be honest. That's me.
Thank you.
Very good. So now we will start the questions. We're gonna run down the table, around and around again until we're done.
Duke, we have 7 different topics. The first one is general. And the first question I'd like to ask you is define for us the roles and responsibilities of the elected position for which you are applying. And what are your qualifications to fill this job?
Roles and responsibilities for the elected position. Well,
Yes, sir.
obviously, it's a legislative position out of the legislative branch of government, so that's what its roles and responsibility are, is to make laws or to set the tone or I'm gonna drag it down to a local level a little bit and set the vision for a school district or a city or so forth. When you move up to the state, I think you still have the same thing. You are setting the vision for your constituents. And you're doing it through the legislative process. You're not the one that interprets the laws, and you're not the one that enforces the laws. You're the legislative branch. And what are my unique qualifications for doing that?
Yes, sir.
I've been in that position now for quite a few years as a school board member. I have had to deal with those types of issues and have had to respond to constituents and deal with things that, sometimes weren't popular, but always tried to do what was right, tried to do what was correct.
Okay, question number 2. Compare and contrast how you will do the job better than your predecessor.
Well, I'll start out by saying that Jim's a friend of mine, and that may not be a great position to take, but he is a friend of mine. And one of the running things that we have going is that I am a whole lot more conservative than he is. I do things, I believe, different than Jim. Jim was there for a long time. Jim had fallen into a situation where he was making friends with everybody. And it's hard to please everybody and do what's right. I think that hurt him in the long run, or towards the end. And I think that I will be different than that. I'm a very principled person. I do what I believe is right, and I don't care who likes it or who doesn't like it. I don't try to please people. I try to do what's right.
Okay, the next section is going to be In God We Trust. The question is, where do you stand on faith-based issues like abortion, sanctity of marriage, and the separation of church and state?
First off, I think that's one of the smartest things that the founders of our country ever did. I know there's been different interpretations of the Establishment Clause, and like it or not, the Supreme Court is the group that interprets these the laws. Their interpretations have changed over the years. The In God We Trust was a relatively recent addition as a motto in terms of the history of the country. But the Establishment Clause and the separation of church and state, I think is one of the smartest things they ever did. And the way that I explain it with the school district is that people say, well, you've taken God out of the schools. Well, that's not true. God is in the schools. Our kids can pray. They can have meetings, they can have Bible study, they can do anything they want. What can't happen is that the teacher cannot stand up and say, Linda, you pray right now, and I'll lead you in prayer. Now, it's kind of easy when you're in a Christian society. And let's face it, Texas is predominantly Christian, okay? And predominantly Protestant, okay? Not all, but predominantly. The issue becomes, it's okay for a teacher to allow my kid to pray, but what if that teacher was Muslim? Would we still feel the same? I think that the separation of church and state is extremely important. One question I'm going to sidestep just a little, and that's on the abortion issue. I think while it is a moral question and a moral issue, I think there's some legislative or some legal interpretation that we have on the definition of life that take it more out of the separation of church and state and more into legislative and judicial.
Thank you.
Question number 4, the executive branch of the federal government has been intimidating Christian churches into self-censorship. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, what would you propose to do to restore the freedom of speech to the pulpits in Texas?
Not 100% sure I agree with the statement, only because I'm trying to come up with exact examples of what you're talking about. But I will answer the question by saying, going back to Linda's question on the separation of church and state, the executive, the judicial, the legislative have no right in religion. And then you couple that with freedom of speech, and they have no business being involved in what is said and done from the pulpit. Likewise, the pulpit has to be very careful on what it does, that it stays in the pulpit and doesn't move over into the political realm. I do believe that churches shouldn't be political bodies. I believe they should be faith bodies.
Number 5, will you sponsor or co-sponsor legislation to allow Judeo-Christian prayer in school, including at school events?
A misnomer, Bill, I'm sorry, the Supreme Court has ruled 3 times in the past 15 years, or 20 years, that prayer is allowed in schools. We allow it at Midlothian. What we don't allow is district-led prayer. And if I could follow up your question, are you asking if I would sponsor a bill that the school district could lead the prayer, or simply that the students could pray? Because the students can pray right now, and they do pray, and we do pray. We have rally around the flagpole, we have Bible study classes, the kids have prayer meetings, they have prayer classes, but what doesn't happen is the district does not lead the prayer. And I do believe in that separation. I think that separation, the distinction is important to me.
Number 6, what does "in God we trust" mean to you?
It's a difficult question. What does it mean to me as a potential legislator, or what does it mean to me as a Christian? As a Christian, it means that I place my faith in God. And in particular, as a Christian, I place my faith in Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. As a legislator, I think that it means that we place we hope that we have a system in place that falls under the umbrella of God. And whether that is, I'm going to have to sidestep a little bit here and say, is it the Judeo-Christian God, the God of Abraham, or is it Christian God? Not sure I can answer that question, but I do believe that this nation was founded by men of faith, and I believe that this nation should be led by men of faith. And I think that the statement that they are men of faith, and by men I do mean the collective mankind, that they should be led by men of faith. And I believe that that is an important principle, an important part of our government.
Do you believe that as Americans we should allow the few non-Judeo-Christians to dictate what is acceptable or tolerable to the majority, and explain your answer.
The answer is simple. The answer is no. We're a constitutional republic, and to the extent that rights are protected, the minority cannot dictate to the majority. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of the question is. I do believe that the non-Judeo-Christians have rights. I think that that's part of our Constitution. It's part of us, that they do have rights, and that we protect their right to be different from the rest of us. But can they, as a small group, dictate how we believe and how we perform? No, and I don't think the process allows for that if it's followed properly.
Under section C of the National and Texas Sovereignty, 8th question, explain your understanding of the 9th and the 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution.
I'd have to look up the 9th and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. My memory in terms of that is not good. I can assure you I've read them, I can assure you I know them, and I can assure you I have a belief and an understanding. But if you're gonna ask me, you know, questions like that, I may not have the answer to it right now. Unless you're willing to provide me the content of the 9th and 10th.
Okay. Item number 9, moving on. What will you do to protect and preserve state sovereignty?
We've seen an erosion of state sovereignty, there's no question about that. I think the latest intrusion upon it is probably Obamacare. I think that, in my opinion, the Supreme Court got it wrong, and I think it's going to be revisited. I think it needs to be revisited. I don't think that Obamacare is a tax. I think it's an incursion upon our rights. Those are the type of issues that will have to be addressed and need to be addressed. As a state legislator, you would find that any vote, bill, whatever that came before me that allowed us to try and push back on the federal government on those issues, I would be in support of.
Okay, next question. Explain your understanding of Article 5 of the Constitution, especially the state's role.
Again, I am not a constitutional specialist. I've read it a number of times. If I would have known that you were going to ask me test questions on the Constitution, I would have briefed up on it before I came up here today. And again, if you're not willing to provide me the content of Article 5, then I'm not going to be able to provide an answer.
Well, thanks.
What is your position regarding the use of foreign contractors for state-funded projects?
In particular, toll roads, I would think you're talking about. Not a great fan of that. In fact, I don't entirely understand how that came about. I don't like the idea of using foreign contractors, period, for state projects. We should be using state contractors. We should be using local people to do these. And we certainly have the expertise and the know-how in Texas to accomplish it.
Very good.
Number 12, what would you propose to end the practice of converting existing highways to toll roads?
I can make an odd argument here that toll roads are the ultimate user fee. I don't know that I would make that argument, but I could make that. For instance, if Midlothian and Waxahachie, the citizens had a vote in a referendum on building a toll road between the two cities, or converting 287 to a toll road, isn't that the ultimate in local control and an end user fee, a tax applied to the people that use the services? So I could make that argument. It's an interesting conversation to have. To answer your question, stay within my 2 minutes. The state cannot and should not arbitrarily convert an existing road to a toll road. We have road use taxes. We have taxes that have paid for those roads and built those roads, they should not convert them to toll roads in order to, gather a new revenue stream.
Number 13, explain what you think federalism is.
One of the strongest discussions in my understanding for the framers of the Constitution was what type of federal government we would have. You could have a strong centralized federal government, or you could have essentially a weak federal government. And I think the weak federal government kind of won out, and I think it should. I think we've been converting more towards the strong federal government over the last 50 years as the federal government has seized more and more of the state's powers. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more I can say about what I believe on that one.
The Third Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. What does it mean to you? And explain its relevance and importance today.
I can assure you I know all the amendments to the Constitution. And I can also assure you, if you were to frame that in terms of the verbiage in the amendment, I would have a wonderful answer for you. I'm going to decline again.
Number 15, what is your understanding and position regarding the Texas nationalist movement?
First off, never heard of it. I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say that it has to do with the conversion of Texas back into a country. I don't know that for a fact. Since I don't know for sure what it is, I'm not going to answer the question. Although I could talk about secession if you want to.
You got a minute and a half.
Secession was attempted once, didn't work out all too well for us. While it's a wonderful topic and it's great for discussing, I don't think that it's actually feasible in terms of could it work. We're tied too intricately to the United States, and I think it would be very, very difficult to separate Texas from that. On the other hand, we would be an oil-producing, oil-exporting country. We'd be self-sufficient on energy. We'd have a great workforce. We'd have wonderful colleges. It'd be a great country. But logistically, I think it would be hard to accomplish.
Okay, number 16. Would you be willing to push for a convention of the states to amend the U.S. Constitution? And if so, what new amendments would you favor and what amendments would you repeal?
First part of the question, and was actually asked this, the answer is probably yes. I don't have an objection to a constitutional convention because that is the methodology for amending the Constitution. Do I have any burning issues right now that I think we need to repeal an amendment? No, not that I can come up with. And do I have an amendment I'd like to add? Probably not. But I have no objection to the convention if something comes up.
All right, next section is fiscal responsibility. How should Texas continue to fund the necessary needs of government?
First off, I think we overfund government a little bit. And I think that the issue everybody talks about taxes. The issue is not really taxes, the issue is spending. I think that we need to identify the areas of government that are not the principal responsibility of government and pull back on them. And I'm not saying cut them off at the head. You gotta be careful how you do that. But I think that we need to pull back on some of the things that we're funding right now. And as far as maintaining fiscal responsibility, the fact of the matter is Texas is gonna show up this year with about a $14 billion fund balance. So Texas is in really good shape economically right now. But I do believe that we need to cut back on spending. Go on, Harlan, ask me about amendment number 17. Paragraph 3.
And we're done with that part.
Article 2.
If elected, what would you do to eliminate the federally mandated requirements imposed on Texas?
Any particular requirement or just all of them?
Read it again.
Yeah, please.
If elected, what would you do to eliminate the federally mandated requirements imposed on Texas?
That question is so open-ended as to be difficult to answer. The federally mandated requirements, which ones? I mean, I would say that Kelly Air Force Base is a federal mandate. I would say that Fort Hood is a federal mandate. Do I want to eliminate those? No. Is Obamacare a federal mandate? Yes. Do I want to eliminate it? Yes. And the way that you do it is by pushing back. I think by failing to fund the expansion in Medicaid, that was a good pushback. I think the Attorney General has some pretty good ideas on how to push back. So I don't think that I would get rid of every federal mandate because some of them are valid. Some of them are within the responsibility of the federal government, and it is a federal mandate. So I think you have to pick and choose and try and go with strict adherence to the Constitution. Even though I don't know the numbers, I know the Constitution. And work it from that point of view.
All right, number 19. Let me start this over. Where was it? Okay. What would justify using the Economic Stabilization Fund, and explain your answer?
The rainy day fund, the rainy day fund is there for catastrophic events. I think that's where you use the money for. Now, you could also use it, and you can make the argument, and it's a good argument, that the rainy day fund is simply for $12 billion that we overcharged our taxpayers. We charged them too much, so we have $12 billion in the bank. So I think you could also make the argument that you can use the rainy day fund to balance the budget, which Governor Perry has been loath to do. He has not used it to balance the budget at any cost. During the recession, there are a couple of issues where he could have used it and didn't. He does tend to like to use it for economic stimulus, and I can see that in certain examples. I'm not a big fan of corporate welfare, though. So the answer to your question is it's designed for catastrophic events. Originally, you were thinking like hurricanes and major events where you would need state money very quickly. I think that we've allowed that fund to get fairly large right now, and I'd like to see some of it come back to the taxpayers.
Number 20, should there be attached to every legislative bill a financial impact statement on the economy and jobs? Explain your answer.
I think there is a financial impact statement attached to every bill. The LBB gives an opinion on every bill, and it's posted alongside it, telling what the budgetary impact is going to be on either the state or the entities that it's affecting. The reason I know this is because any school bill that comes up, I go check LBB on it and see what they're saying that the impact on the school district is. So I think it's already there.
Okay, the next section is under personal responsibility. Would you support drug testing for recipients of any and all Texas state assistance programs? Explain your answer.
Yes. I believe in, there's several things that I believe in, that some of them aren't popular, some of them are. I believe in drug testing. If you're gonna take our state money for welfare, for anything like that, then you need to be clean and sober, and you need to be looking for a job, and you need to be looking for a real job. I have nothing against helping somebody if they're down. Michael, if you told me right now that you were dead broke and you needed, $20 or $100 to buy you and your wife a hamburger, I'd give you the money. I believe that's my responsibility. I don't believe it's the state's responsibility, though. So anybody that's taking money from our taxpayers, and whether it's deserved or not deserved, they need to be able to prove that they're clean, they're sober, that they're looking for a job. And that, to me, that's just really straightforward.
Question 22, what is your motivation for running for a $600 a month job?
Is that all?
Isn't that enough?
Guys, I have no illusions of grandeur. I have no desire to be anything more than what I am. But I've always felt the need to serve. It's part of my DNA. I've served in boards and other capacities. I've served on the school board, which also, it pays even less than $600 a year, it pays nothing. I've always had the desire to serve, and whether it be in an elected capacity or an appointed capacity or a church capacity or family, whatever, it's just me, it's just what I've been. I don't want to be president, I don't want to be governor. I don't know that I really want to be state representative. I mean, I do, because I think it's important that people do it. But I think that we need more people to run and more people to put themselves out there because they want to serve and not because they want to be somebody. I don't want to be anybody. I'm just me.
'23, this is under rule of law. With the understanding that the federal government has shirked its duty to protect Texas borders, what would you propose to curb the flow of illegal immigration?
Dewhurst spent, $5 million to seal the borders for a short period of time, and it worked. The question is, do we allow the federal government to shirk their responsibilities, or do we push the point? Do we force them to seal their borders? Now, there are too many more issues than just the Hispanics coming across to do, day labor here in Texas. We've got a border that allows, terrorists to come across. We've got a border that simply is not safe. It has to be sealed. I'm going to say first and foremost, it is the federal government's responsibility, and we have to push them to accept the responsibility. Secondary to that, and your question was, what do we do if they don't? I do believe in shoring up the border. I do believe in committing some state resources to do so. Understand that if you seal the Texas border, they simply head a little bit further northwest and come across in Arizona. And then we've got to seal the El Paso border.
Okay, next question. Do you believe that the U.S. Constitution is a living, breathing document? Explain your answer.
I think I know. This is one of those deals where I told you you're going to hear me. You're not going to hear what a handler said or something like that. I think I know what your position is on this. And I think I'm going to give you the answer you don't want to hear, but I'm hoping I'm going to be able to explain it. The Constitution is a living, breathing document. It provides within itself the ability to make changes to itself. It gives us 200 and however many years later, 30 years later, the ability to make a change. You asked me if I would support a constitutional convention. That is, by definition, a document that can change. It is a living, breathing document. Now, I'm going to give you the second part of that answer, and I'm going to say, I think this is what you're asking. Can that document be changed dynamically? And the answer to that is no, it should not. We have 3 branches of government. If those 3 branches of government behave properly, then the only branch that interprets the Constitution is the judicial, and that is their job. And in particular, the Supreme Court of the United States is the final arbiter of the interpretation of the Constitution. Your question, living and breathing, you have to go back and look over the last 200 years, though. The Supreme Court has changed. It changes depending on which president has how many appointments. You know, you've got 4-3 votes sitting there right now on several issues. So, you know, can it change? Yes. And the simple answer, the hard part is, I believe it's living and breathing because it provides in and of itself the ability to change itself. The evacuation notice.
Next section is limited government. Do you have any ideas or proposals to cut spending or the size of government in Austin?
Have some. One of the simplest things that we could do, in my industry, I don't know, nobody's ever asked me what I do, but I sell computers. And in my industry, we have a time of year called harvest. And harvest is the period between about June or July and October 1st. Any idea why we call that harvest? Because all of the governmental entities are spending out their budget. Because if you don't spend it, you lose it, right? I think that there could be mechanisms put in place to curtail or get rid of the harvest season. There could be budget procedures put in place that would allow a budget manager at a smaller level there not to be incentivized to spend out their budget. And I think we'd be surprised at how much spending we would cut just by doing that.
Number 26. Where in the U.S. Constitution is the separation of church and state defined?
Nowhere. It says that the government should make no law about the establishment of religion, right? The Establishment Clause is talking about the establishment of religion. The actual separation of church and state is an interpretation that has happened over the years. And I personally, from my earlier answer, I think you realize that I believe this is the correct interpretation. But the Constitution, I think the only thing that it says about that I can remember, unless I'm missing something, and that's always possible, is that the government shall not make any rules as to the establishment of a religion.
Number 27. Do you have any ideas or proposals regarding the property tax issue in Texas?
I have some ideas that are bad, and they're not mine. You know, the idea of doing away with property tax, you're just going to have to replace it with something else. Again, I said earlier, the taxes aren't the issue, the spending's the issue. We work on spending, taxes will be okay. The thought process that you never own a piece of property because of the property tax, I don't know that that's, in my mind, a valid assessment. That's saying that I never own a car because I have to buy license plates. You know, there'd be nothing that you could ever own in your life, because there's taxes associated with everything, no matter how small they are. There's another bad idea that was floated recently, and that was with appraisal caps. And even though it sounds like a good idea, when you start digging into it and looking at what it actually does to property values, it's a bad idea also, lowering the appraisal cap. So do I have any ideas on property tax? Yeah, I have some that I think are bad ideas.
What are your views regarding nullification of overreaching federal statutes?
Again, I'm going to complain a little bit about the question. Who's doing the nullification? If it's John Q. Citizen deciding that he's gonna nullify a federal statute, I think that's probably a bad idea. If it's a state court nullifying a federal statute, then I think there's a mechanism in place for them to do that. I think that the states have the right to challenge a federal statute. And I think that they have the right to nullify the federal statute.
Number 29, would you be in favor of legislation enforcing laws allowing surveillance of Americans in Texas?
Just Americans? They could surveil everybody. Could you read the question again, please?
Sure. Would you be in favor of legislation enforcing laws allowing surveillance of Americans in Texas?
Enforcing laws allowing surveillance of Americans in Texas. No. Yeah, no.
And the last one.
Really?
You're down the last one here.
Amendment 43.
How'd you guess? No. How many articles and how many amendments are there in the U.S. Constitution?
Oh, man.
Oh man, I didn't say that. Was that like an answer?
Let me tell you something about me, guys. I will not remember your names and faces when I walk out of here. I'm horrible at it. I am really good at facts and figures. I am really good in a linear thought process. And I generally don't say stupid stuff. What I am really poor at is what chapter, what verse, what number, what this. Have been all my life. Don't know that I'll ever get better. I'm 57 years old. I bought a book on how to remember things, lost the book, couldn't remember where it was. So.
All right,
Again, you got 60 seconds to make a closing statement.
Guys, I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I don't know, part of that felt like a test, I'll be honest with you. And while I do well at tests, there are things that I need to know I'm being tested on. So I gave you honest answers. I didn't try and lie to you, didn't try to make you love me. I hope that, we sit down and talk, you'd find that we do agree on a lot of stuff. I hope you would find that I'm thoughtful. I am able to form and frame a discussion in my mind and come up with a logical answer. And I also think you would find that even when we disagree, we can still be friends. I think that's one of the best things about this country, and that's what sets us apart from other nations. That's it.
thank you, Dick, for coming and visiting with us.
Thank you. And nobody knew what the Third Amendment was.
Yeah.
What is the Third Amendment? just tell me what it is, and you, I will wait till he puts the record.
Oh, that's all, I was just kind of backing it back a little bit.
Okay. What's,
Well,
Shall we say?
we can chat in the hall.
okay, well, we're not recording.
Well, yeah, they're gonna be going until
Oh,
you
they're
step
still
up.
going, okay,
Yep.
then I understand.
And what we're gonna do is just basically have raw video from the time you walk in to the time you walk out, each one of the
That ought to
candidates.
be exciting.
Thanks for coming.